All right, so there were a couple of different models. So there is business process redesign versus continuous improvement. They both have their strengths. Most businesses really try to do continuous improvement. In other words, they're continuing to change and evolve over time. But at some point, you're going to look at a business unit. You don't do the entire company this way, but think about Peru as a good example. At some point, you may look at admissions and say, all right, the world has changed around us. We've tried to evolve, but we need to do kind of that clean slate approach. Stop how we're doing things now, move to a brand new model. And that's what business process redesign really is. It's very dramatic. If you're an employee, it's frightening because quite frankly, some of the times what we do when we have a complete business redesign is, do we change personnel? Do we eliminate personnel? Maybe we automate a lot of processes. So it can be really scary for people. But here's what I'd like to take away from that. If you're not contributing, you're working as an employee and you know you're not contributing, should you be afraid for your job anyway? Yeah. Are there people that get swept away in a redesign? Unfortunately, it happens. But 99% of the time what we take are all the good and they sweep over with it. But sometimes we do automate things and we automate them for a good reason. Not just because we thought, hey, we need to get rid of Mary Beth over there in the admissions department or whoever it is. Continuous improvement says we're going to focus on some areas and we're going to improve them as we go. So they're kind of both ends. Do we do things that are kind of in between sometimes also? And the book says you have to do either A or B. The reality is businesses sometimes have other methods that they do, and somewhere in the middle. So if we need to dramatically catch up, so maybe every other college we look at does something so different in admissions that we need to figure out a plan to catch up, that's process redesign. If we're doing things like changing paper forms to electronic forms, that's that idea of continuous improvement. So maybe that will make a little more sense looking at it that way. So there is this model, Lewin's change model, and it has the idea of unfreezing, refreezing. So we make a change, so we unfreeze. So we know we have our processes typically are frozen in how they're going to work. In other words, we're going to take in students, we're going to process them A, B, and C, and D, and that process is frozen. In this case, we use those terms freezing and unthawing. So we unthaw the process, so we allow it to change, we make our change, and then we refreeze how that process works. So this is really a little more down the rabbit hole in terms of how do we actually change that process. And so there's an easier way to do it. So this is that idea. Unfreezing. So we get prepared for that change. We know what's going to happen. Making that change may be a short time. It may be a long time. And then we freeze. So in other words, why do we freeze though? What is the advantage of, instead of continuing to improve, why do we want to freeze it temporarily at least? How we've changed it. What would be a reason for that? Now, why would you freeze it? After you've made your changes, why would you freeze it and say, hey, we're not going to make any more changes for a little bit? We're going to... So it is a way for people to learn, but I think the more important reason is something called assessment. Is every change always good? Do we make changes that sometimes we go, holy crap, we screwed this up, we need to go back? And this is kind of that model of, oh, we made a mistake. We can figure out what went wrong. It would be great if we always knew what was going to happen and we were going to do it right. But big players have made huge mistakes. Does anybody like Coke? A couple of Coke drinkers in here. We've all heard of Coca-Cola. So many years ago when you were toddlers, they brought out something called New Coke. Has anybody heard of that? Yeah. It was a horrible disaster. They tried to reformulate the flavor of this drink that's been around for 100 years. It tasted like extra syrupy, sugary Pepsi, and it was horrible. And they lost their butt on it. So sometimes change is good. Sometimes it's not. And so this gives us that ability to examine that change. And that's what we really want to always do, is we're assessing change. We have entire committees and different things on our campuses and most businesses to look at those ideas and see if we can figure out how to change them. So, we jump to the model. Sometimes it's easier. So, Lewin's force field analysis. You've also seen this in some of your business marketing and other ones. So this one should be familiar to you. This one is a little different. So Leavitt's diamond really makes sense when you look at it, and I think it's easier to look at this way. So it really says there's 4 things that affect our business. So technology, people, task, and structure. Would you agree that all of those are necessary in a business? Do we need people? So even though we say we're going to have all this technology, so we're Google. Does Google still need people? Yeah. Do we need a structure in those people and how they work? Mm-hmm. And if I just send you out and say, all right, go do something, and they don't give you a specific task, is that really good? No. And then we know we have to have that technology side. That's why we're here in this class, is we're trying to figure out how does technology play a role in what we do. So this one I think is a little fairly easier. Technology acceptance model. So here we have that feedback loop. So notice here that as things loop around, we say, hey, is that actually working? And it also implies that we need user acceptance. I can make all the changes I want in our admissions department, and I just keep picking on them because it's an easy one because we know it changes quite a bit. But if I don't get user acceptance, if I don't get student acceptance, have we done any good? No. And so we know that no matter what we do, we have to get those users, we have to get the customers on board with what we're doing. And so those are kind of a couple of them that are really clear. The diffusion theory really says, when do we develop new ideas? Or when do we implement things? And innovators, this can be a way into a new market and you can be super successful, but it also is the most risky area to be in. So we've seen a lot of examples of companies that came out too early and they failed. And it's some of these companies are ones you know. Has anybody heard of Apple? Little tiny company. So Apple came out with something called the Newton. Has anybody heard of a Newton? Probably not. Have you heard of a Palm Pilot? Vaguely. So long before your phone could do everything for you, we had what were called personal planners. We weren't interconnected. It was just an electronic planner. Apple came out way too early. They had a product called the Newton. They lost $100 million on this project or more. It was too early. So now, on the other hand, they came out with an iPhone. Were they the first phone that was really a smartphone? No. But they came out a little later in the market. Now, there really are only 2 players in the smartphone market. There's Android and there's Apple. Now, there's a lot of people selling Android, but there's really only those 2 markets. You're either Apple or you're Android. Which one's bigger in the world, do you think? How many say Apple? How many people think Apple is the biggest phone provider? Ooh, only a couple? 3, 4. How many think Android is bigger than iPhone? They do have more brands under them. Apple says, I am not going to lean or lease or sell my software to anybody else. I want to very tightly control it. So are they very impactful? They're about 20% of the cell phone market. Does that mean that they are very impactful? They sell 1 billion cell phones every quarter. They have a lot of market penetration, but they don't sell the most. But it's by basing it on when they came out. But on the same hand, do you want to be the laggard that finally comes out with an electric car, for example? Probably not. So you have to try to figure out what the market is and when things are developing. And so you'll see that a lot in your marketing classes about how do I market things. And so it's that idea between innovation and laggard. So somewhere in between is probably a good place to be. You don't want to be the one that finally decides, hey, we need to have Wi-Fi on our campus. Peru State College was one of the last colleges in the United States to have Wi-Fi available for students. Do you realize that? Now it's ubiquitous on our campus. But we waited forever because we were afraid of security concerns and we were afraid of other things. Maybe we were afraid of spending the money. I'm not really sure. But for many, many years, there was only a handful of Wi-Fi spots on campus that were not accessible to students. It's hard to even imagine that. Every other college you went to in the U.S., you could get Wi-Fi. Every place I went, and guess what? Here, oh, we don't have any Wi-Fi. Sorry. It was a weird way to live, and we were at that very laggardy stage, and it hurt business. When the governor came to visit the campus and they didn't have a Wi-Fi for him and his staff to get onto, do you think that made us look like idiots? Yeah, I bet it did. When students came to campus and they said, hey, how do I get into the Wi-Fi with my computer? We don't have it. Wait, what? So the other part of that was we spent more money then because we had to develop that whole network. So make sure you've read about the different careers. You may think, man, I'm never going into that career where I'm going to use technology. And I think every one of you is wrong. Can you name a career that does not use technology right now? A deckhand on a ship? They may not directly. The ship and the captain do. All right, I'll buy that one. So here's one that I had a student throw out last year. A sex worker. Now, I was a little frightened when this young lady said that. But the reality is, do they use technology even? They're putting out ads. I had somebody say a garbage collector. Now, the guy actually picking up the trash can may not be using technology, but are those trash trucks using technology? Yeah. They have mapping apps, they have billing software. And you think, ooh, trash. Does anybody here want to pick up trash every day for their life? No? That's why we're in college. Every summer, now I didn't this summer because of COVID, but I have a high school friend of mine who owns a trash service now. And usually I'll go back and we'll hang out and we'll go run a trash run and I'll throw trash cans in there. So I'll go from college professor to trash guy. It's an interesting take on life. But I will tell you, in terms of money, none of you are going to make what he makes as owning a trash service. Isn't that strange? And he said, I didn't want to go to college. He went to a couple of trade schools. He went to a trade school and became an auto body guy, ran his own body shop for a while. I actually sold that and retired in his 30s, and then saw that the city that he's in was taking bids for a trash service, and he just threw one in out of giggles. Had no trash service, had no knowledge of it. But he said, I'm kind of bored. And he said, all right, I'll do it. He went out and bought a trash truck, hired some people, and he's a very shrewd business guy. And as part of it is finding a niche, finding that piece that you're willing to do that other people aren't. And that's where you can make some money. And he makes a ton of money. I love to go on vacation with him because it's like Toyland. But he hides them very well. So his house is fairly conservative in a smaller town. He, at some point when he decides to sell the trash company, says, I already have the house drawn up. I have the land bought. But I cannot build a house like I want until I sell that service because the people in the town will be very upset that I have spent that money. It's that astute business sense. even though he never went to business college. So that idea of information systems, some of you go, man, I hate computers. Does anybody say that on a regular basis? Hopefully not. Because they are going to be probably the thing you're going to interact with the most. Any other jobs? Can anybody think of anything else? Deckhand was new. And you can't. So if you're out there with a shovel in your hand, you're probably not using a ton of technology. Let's be honest. Does anybody want to have a shovel in their hand every day? I hope not. But do those jobs need done? I will point out another career. If you want to make money and you're willing to deal with other people's shit, literally, a plumber. Do you guys have any idea what a plumber can generate in revenue? It's a pretty good living. But again, I don't really want my arm in somebody else's toilet. You know what? It is what it is. How do we evolve and change? How many of you ran into somebody who says, man, that's the way we've always done it? And change is hard. And business changes around you. All right, Bailey, can I pick on your dad? Okay. So if you don't know, Bailey's actually my niece. And I work with her dad a little bit on a side business. Her dad is the chief of police in a small town. Does your dad like computers and change? No. But are they forced to? Yeah. We have to be able to make those changes. And I giggle every time I see him now with a keyboard, because now he's got to be a keyboard warrior. He's in there searching for garage sales. He's searching all kinds of stuff. Part of that is that willingness to change, and it takes a lot of effort for most of us to change. It really does. If you're used to a Mac and I make you have to use a PC, are you happy? No, you're grumbling like, oh, I don't know where anything's at. The same way if I have to use my Mac a lot, it takes me a while to change. I want you to do is be prepared to change lifelong, to always be thinking and changing and willing to do things. Because those skills that you used to learn are gone. In fact, what we teach you today as far as a skill, so if you took CMIS 101 and we showed you how Word worked today, by the time you graduate, that's already obsolete. It changes that quickly. They used to have classes in colleges and high schools on how to make a phone call because it was fairly complicated when they had rotary dials. When's the last time you saw a rotary dial phone? That technology has changed. In fact, now if I said, you need to go to a phone in the house, you're like, wait, my cell phone's with me. Why do I need to go somewhere? Most of you don't have a home phone line. The world has changed, and we need to be prepared for those changes. And as a business, we need to be prepared for those changes. Are our employees, if I see an employee on their phone and they're working for me, what's my first thought generally as a manager? That they're slacking off? That they're not doing something? But how do I know what they're really doing isn't searching for something because I had really slow internet and they couldn't make a search on that computer, or their computer's so old, or I restricted so much of the activities on there they couldn't search for something. Maybe they took a picture of something and they're trying to troubleshoot why the computer's not working. So those first impressions can sometimes be wrong. Now, the flip side of that, if I see them and they're making TikTok videos, then we know that something's going wrong. But we need to be able to make that lifelong commitment to saying, you know what, I'm going to read a book. I'm going to read a magazine. I'm going to change my life every day. Are technical skills important? Yes. Can I make money and a career out of technical skills? You betcha. You betcha. The federal government, when you look at the demand for technical skills, and these numbers are wrong. And part of the reason they're wrong is this horrible thing called COVID. Do you think technical skills jobs are in demand right now with COVID? You bet. Companies are trying to figure out how they can do more with less. And so what are they hiring? They're hiring technical people and try to figure out how can we work people at home? How can we work people socially distanced? So I think these numbers, quite frankly, right now are wrong, and they're being skewed by COVID. We know that this is certainly affected right now. One of the ways companies got their technical expertise was they imported workers from other countries on H-1B and other visa programs. Is that happening right now? No, we're not letting people in. Other countries are saying, oh, hell no, you can't go to that United States. You're the COVID capital of the world right now. Nope, not going. So while this can be a great way to get new employees, there's a lot of strings attached to it. So even if I do use it, and that program does come back, it's about $20,000 to sponsor an employee. So great, I can get an employee from another country that's got some technical skills, but it's not free. It's not as cheap as what people would like to think it is. So take a look at those careers. Some of those may not appeal to you right now, but as you start growing in your career, you may think, you know, this is a great idea. If you land in a smaller company, smaller being 50, 100 employees, you are not as siloed as we used to be, where each specific job had one specific thing they did. Now it's kind of that mantra of, hey, we all have to pull together. And so if we need to come in and we need to update computer systems, for example, it's not, hey, let's pick on Chris, and Chris gets to do it all. It's fielded out to a lot of people. So we need those skills, those keeping on track of those. When we look at things like security that we're going to look in here later, your security person in there cannot do it all. No matter how great they are, if you're going to click on emails for hair loss products or beauty products that you get unsolicited, or you get one that says, hey, payroll information, click here, I don't care how smart you are, if you aren't trained in that security aspect, guess what? You're going to fall for those. And one person, that security officer, can't stop that and make that company safe. My wife works for UNL. We've all heard of it, fairly large university. The department she works in has about, I think, 55 employees, and they're kind of in a building off downtown. About 30 of those are at least PhDs. Everybody there has a master's degree plus. Highly educated group of people. Last year, at exactly the moment, because somebody had some inside information, they all got an email saying, hey, you need to log into what's called Firefly, which is the payroll system. And if you're on our campus, we use Firefly also. And it said, hey, log in. Click here to see your salary raise letter. Well, if you get that and it looks official, what are you guys all going to do? You're all going to log in. You're going to go, hey, I got to see how much money I'm going to make. Now remember, master's degree on up. So lawyers, PhD behaviorists, psychologists, all these other people. The only difference was when they went to their site off the email link, it asked for not just your NUID and your password, and it said, for verification for your payroll letter, we need your Social Security number. So they put in 3 pieces of information. It was not Firefly hosted by UNL. How many people do you think out of 55 did that? It was over 30. One of the few that didn't, my wife, and now probably because I preach a lot at her, called me and said, hey, this seems weird. And I said, whoa, send me a copy of the email, I'll look. So somebody had seen Firefly and seen some of the inner workings. So my guess is it was a former employee of UNL that did this, but they had their NUID, they had their name, they had their Social Security number. Could they cause havoc with that pieces of information? Yeah. But it's not just one person. That security team, UNL would think have some pretty good security, right? They do. But we can't stop everything. So it's got to be a team. So even if you think, I hate technology, I'm never going to use it, technology is evil, guess what? You're going to have to use it at some point. So let's talk about really quickly, before we launch into some new material, let's look at week 1 and what you need to do inside of here to pass. So the preview and the reading kind of lead you into that. are some video clips, and I like to put those in there so that you have a kind of a quick, they're a couple minutes, and you should watch those. So it's got sustaining and disruption, Internet of Things, information systems. So those are good and informational. They don't necessarily contribute to your grade, but they give you some ideas of what's going on. So for the first chapter, I actually made the review a graded item. It's worth like 3 or 4 points. It's not a ton, but just to get you to go in and make sure you've read it. There is a reinforcement that says, here's some key terms. It's got flashcards. It's not graded, but it's a good way to learn them. One of the things we are going to do in this class is a lot of terminology. So make sure that you use those. These are tools you have available. So what we are going to look at then is there is a crossword puzzle. My understanding doesn't always work. It's not important in terms of a grade. It's just a handy way to memorize terminology. Apparently on the Macs, no matter even if you're using Chrome, it does not like to work. Firefox on a Windows PC, I got it to work the other night. This one, they seem to have some struggles with. So if you can't get it to work, don't panic. Life will go on. It's just another one. I like it if you can use it because crossword puzzles are kind of fun to fill out. So we're going to look at this first one here, putting principles into practice. So these are some use cases. In other words, there's an entire case. So that is a graded assignment, and I'll show you what it looks like here. So if I click into it, is it going to open? Yay. All right. If Zoom is dead, I'm always nervous what else is going to break at any given day. So in this, let me hit the start button. Start assignment now. So these give a case. And so in this case, we're talking about Kroger. Has anybody shopped in a Kroger store? Kroger's owns a lot of different things. They own Baker's shopping stores, Dillon's, Kroger's, Baker's, all kinds of stuff. So they're talking about Kroger's, and they talk about something they had called Q-Vision. And then it's got 3 questions you need to answer based on that reading. These are real life, real world examples. They're not horribly over the top. So you need to make sure you do this for class. The next piece in here, scrolled away from me, is we are going to do this week, we are going to try the critical thinking. Get over to the window where it opens. And again, this is a case that we find. Start. So in this case, I use the same case, but you have some questions to submit. So critical thinking questions and some review questions. So a couple of review ones to see if you can classify things, and then these critical thinking. So these you need to create in a Word document, and then you upload that file in Word format. So you'll answer those, and then you click Choose File, submit it. I have to manually grade those. Those are not automatically graded, obviously. So here's the question. Some of these are out there on various websites, some form of this, some version of it. If you copy and paste directly out of Chegg or some other thing, you will fail this assignment. And I hate being, again, that hard butt on it. Are there other information resources you can use? Yes, you can go look at all kinds of stuff. All the information is actually here and in your book. Use your own brain. And I don't want to have to yell at people for copying and pasting stuff in there and cheating. That is not my intent. It does not help you get any of this information in your brain if you do that. So make sure you do that. So we're going to give you some time for that. Then I'll go back. Hang on. So the other last piece then is there is a unit test. So there is a review questions. You can use those for your own use. And then there is a test.